Welcome to the channel. Today's video is about how the DNA of modern France carries echoes of Celts, Romans, and Franks. Scientists sequencing ancient remains found in Gaulish hill forts and Roman cemeteries discovered that nearly 35% of French DNA traces back to Celtic origins, 30% to Roman settlers, and 25% to Frankish tribes. This mixture tells a tale of survival, conquest, and adaptation. Archaeological and genetic studies reveal that every province of France, north, south, east, and west, holds a distinct ancestral story. Let's uncover how these ancient peoples shaped one of Europe's most diverse and enduring genetic mosaics.
Do you know that every strand of DNA in modern France tells a story that began thousands of years ago? Scientists studying population genetics have revealed that the French genome is a living archive of ancient migrations. It holds traces of Celtic warriors, Roman settlers, Germanic tribes, and even Scandinavian adventurers. Each gene carries whispers of battles, alliances, and forgotten empires. When laboratories sequence French DNA today, they uncover not just ancestry but a record of how civilization itself evolved across Western Europe. The discovery shocked historians because the patterns of genetic inheritance matched old maps of conquest and trade. It showed that nations are not just born from borders but from the mingling of bloodlines across time. Modern research using genome mapping compared samples from ancient Gaulish graves, Roman villas, and Frankish cemeteries. The data revealed clear markers connecting present-day French people to these deep roots. Geneticists from the USA also contributed to the study, adding a global comparison that highlighted how interconnected European populations truly are. According to reports from European research centers, about 60% of genetic markers in France trace to Iron Age Celts known as the Gauls. These were the first great unifiers of the land long before Rome's legions arrived. Their influence is strongest in the western regions, where surnames and dialects still echo their past. Yet DNA also tells of later transformations. Around 2 millennia ago, Roman expansion reshaped Europe's genetic landscape. Soldiers, settlers, and merchants from Italy and the Mediterranean introduced southern bloodlines. Archaeological evidence from southern France reveals Roman villas built near Celtic villages, and genome studies confirm intermarriage between the two peoples. This fusion helped form the early foundations of what became French identity. Centuries later, the Franks brought Germanic genes from the northeast. They conquered Gaul and established a kingdom that bore their name. Their blood mixed with the Latinized Gauls, producing a genetic blend that mirrors the union of language and culture that followed. What makes French DNA remarkable is how balanced these ancient elements remain. While neighboring nations showed dominance of one lineage, France maintains near equal portions of Celtic, Latin, and Germanic ancestry. Experts suggest this diversity contributed to the nation's adaptability and cultural richness. In Brittany, Celtic DNA persists more strongly, while in Provence, southern Mediterranean markers dominate. Northern regions show clearer Germanic influence, especially around ancient Frankish settlements. Every valley and river seems to tell a different genetic story. With modern sequencing technology, scientists can identify not only origins but also migration timing. For example, isotopic data from ancient teeth found near the Loire Valley show shifts in population mobility after the fall of Rome. The DNA changes align with written records describing invasions and resettlements. But despite war and chaos, the core genetic makeup remains stable. It absorbed newcomers rather than erasing them. That resilience defines the French genome today. It is not a pure line from one people, but a living mosaic of many. Geneticists often use the term admixture to describe this blending, and France stands as a perfect example of it. Historians now collaborate with biologists to reconstruct forgotten migrations. Computer models simulate how waves of settlers intermingled across centuries, leaving invisible footprints inside modern cells. The results challenge national myths of origin. They show that identity is layered and that cultural pride coexists with biological diversity. In Paris, museums display artifacts from Gaulish warriors alongside Roman sculptures, yet beneath the glass another story continues in every visitor's DNA. New discoveries also connect French genetic history to broader global trends. Mitochondrial DNA, inherited through maternal lines, links some French families to ancient populations of the Iberian Peninsula and even earlier Stone Age settlers who crossed from the Atlantic coast. This continuity over tens of thousands of years reveals how stable Europe's population core has been despite countless invasions. It also helps scientists understand how climate shifts and migration shaped human adaptation. DNA is not just about ancestry. It is a record of survival and transformation. Each strand encodes how people endured plagues, winters, and wars. That is why population genetics has become such a vital field in historical research. France offers one of the most detailed genetic archives in Europe because of its central location and long history of contact with surrounding peoples. Researchers extract genetic material from ancient bones, compare it with modern volunteers, and trace how certain genes spread with trade, farming, and empire. Every analysis deepens the understanding of how human movement creates nations. The emerging picture is one of unity through diversity. The French genome stands as a mirror reflecting Europe's shared past. It also reminds the modern world that identity cannot be defined by a single origin story. Instead, it is the sum of thousands of lives intertwined across time. Science turns that truth into data, proving that history lives in every cell. As researchers continue decoding ancient DNA, new surprises await. Some may change how we see European ancestry forever. Here's a question. Please comment in the comment box. Which ancient people do you think contributed most to shaping the modern French identity? Long before France had kings or cathedrals, the land was called Gaul. It was the heart of the Celtic world, filled with forests, rivers, and fortified hill towns. Archaeologists have uncovered vast settlements known as Oppenheimer, built by Celtic tribes who thrived between the 5th and 1st centuries BCE. These people were not barbarians as Roman writers once claimed. They were skilled metal workers, traders, and farmers who spoke vibrant dialects and practiced intricate art. Modern genetic studies reveal that their blood still flows in millions of French citizens today. When scientists analyzed ancient remains from sites across central France, they discovered strong continuity between Iron Age Gauls and the present population. The genetic signature includes markers found in ancient British and Irish Celts, proving that a shared ancestry once linked these Atlantic peoples. According to experts, up to 60% of people living in Western France carry these ancient Celtic lineages. That figure is similar to the persistence of Viking genes in Scandinavia or Anglo-Saxon traces in England. The discovery redefined how historians view France's origins. It showed that beneath the layers of empire, conquest, and migration, the Celtic foundation never disappeared. The Gauls were the first to unify vast regions under shared cultural patterns. Their society was tribal yet interconnected. Trade routes ran from the Loire to the Rhine, carrying amber, salt, and wine. These networks also carried genes. Over generations, the Celtic heartland became a melting zone of northern and southern influences. Genetic evidence from skeletons in Burgundy and Champagne shows Mediterranean ancestry mixing with local Celtic DNA as early as 300 BCE. This happened through trade and intermarriage long before Rome's armies arrived. Ancient coins, pottery, and jewelry reveal how Gaul served as Europe's bridge between cultures. That bridge is still visible in the genetic diversity of the French people. Celtic DNA dominates in Brittany, where language and folklore preserve echoes of ancient Gaulish roots. In regions like Auvergne and Limousin, Y chromosome markers associated with the Celts remain especially strong. These patterns confirm written accounts describing dense tribal populations that resisted Roman assimilation. Yet the Gauls were not isolated. They absorbed influences from Iberia, Italy, and even the distant Balkans. The expansion of trade through the Rhone Valley brought new genes into the Celtic mix, shaping early regional differences still visible today. For centuries, scholars believed Romanization erased Gaulish identity. DNA has now proven otherwise. Instead of being replaced, Celtic populations intermarried with newcomers, preserving much of their genetic base. In some cases, local elites adopted Latin culture while keeping Celtic bloodlines intact. The rural majority remained biologically continuous across the centuries. This explains why modern French DNA retains deep time patterns distinct from Italy or Germany despite shared history. Ancient inscriptions found in Gaulish language also mirror this resilience. They suggest a people proud of their heritage, valuing memory and land. Their descendants carried that strength into later eras of invasion and empire. When modern researchers mapped mitochondrial DNA, passed from mothers to children, they discovered that many French families trace female ancestry to the same genetic clusters present in pre-Roman Gaul. This maternal stability indicates that local women maintained continuity even during turbulent times. It is one of the reasons France's regional genetics remain so balanced. Scientists also used isotope analysis to learn where these ancient individuals grew up. Many were locals, confirming that communities were rooted for generations in the same valleys. That deep attachment shaped both culture and biology. Even centuries after conquest, the descendants of Gauls lived where their ancestors had farmed. Their genetic fingerprint became the core of France's population. According to reports from European genetic institutes, this continuity stands among the strongest in Western Europe. It contrasts with Britain or northern Italy, where later migrations diluted ancient ancestry more drastically. This finding has inspired a new appreciation of Celtic endurance. The Gauls are no longer seen as a lost people, but as the biological backbone of a modern nation. Their spirit lingers not only in DNA but in language, place names, and traditions that survived Romanization and modernization alike. When viewed under the microscope, every French genome tells a story that begins with these ancient tribes. It speaks of courage, craftsmanship, and adaptation. From hillfoots to vineyards, their legacy runs through the veins of France. Genetic data now lets historians trace this inheritance with scientific precision. It also connects Europe's past to global studies. By comparing French genomes with samples from Ireland, Spain, and the USA, researchers build a universal map of human migration. Each data point becomes a thread linking continents through shared ancestry. It reminds us that national borders are recent, but human bonds are ancient. DNA turns myth into measurable truth. The Celtic legacy is not just a memory. It is a living science that explains how diversity and unity coexist within one nation. Here's a question. Please comment in the comment box. Do you think ancient Celtic traditions still influence the culture and identity of modern France today? When the Roman Empire began to crumble, the Franks crossed the Rhine and entered Gaul. They were Germanic tribes seeking new lands, and their arrival marked one of the most important turning points in European history. Archaeologists have found Frankish burial sites across northern France filled with swords, fibulae, and ornaments that reveal both wealth and warfare. Genetic analysis confirms their impact. Ancient DNA from these graves shows distinct Northern European markers that differ from the earliest Celtic and Roman layers. Yet rather than replacing local populations, the Franks intermarried, blending their Germanic bloodlines with the Latin-speaking Gauls. This fusion would give birth to the foundations of the French nation. According to recent genetic reports, around 20% of modern northern French DNA can be traced to Germanic ancestry linked to the Franks. The genetic influence is strongest in regions like Picardy and Ile-de-France, where the early Frankish kingdoms flourished. The tribe's leaders, such as Clovis, established dynasties that united divided territories. Their new political and cultural systems merged Roman administration with Germanic law, and this duality became a defining feature of medieval France. The DNA evidence mirrors this historical synthesis. Germanic Y chromosome markers spread steadily across northern and central France between the 5th and 7th centuries. The process was gradual, not violent. Families blended, and identities shifted. What had been Roman Gaul became a hybrid society where Celtic roots, Roman traditions, and Germanic vitality coexisted. Experts suggest that this biological mixture also strengthened genetic diversity, improving resilience against disease and environmental change. The Franks came from regions near the modern Netherlands and Western Germany, areas characterized by dense tribal networks and mobility. They were excellent farmers and warriors who adapted quickly to new lands. Their genes carried adaptations to colder climates, and these traits persisted in northern French populations. Researchers note minor genetic overlaps with early medieval samples from Scandinavia, suggesting that trade and migration connected the broader Germanic world. Linguistic evidence complements the DNA data. Words of Frankish origin survive in modern French, hidden beneath layers of Latin grammar. Terms related to war, governance, and everyday life trace back to these early settlers. DNA provides the biological proof of the same blending seen in language. Historians now believe that Frankish integration was one of the key factors that helped France recover stability after Rome's fall. The Franks brought organization, alliances, and military strength. They also absorbed local culture rather than destroying it. Modern genetic maps illustrate this continuity. The core of Frankish ancestry remains strongest near Paris, radiating outward into the heartland. Southern France, by contrast, shows little Germanic influence, maintaining its oldest Celtic and Latin genetic signatures. This north-south contrast still shapes regional differences today. Even surnames and physical traits occasionally reflect these ancient distinctions. DNA tells the story more clearly than any chronicle could. By comparing genomes from ancient graves, scientists can trace how Germanic markers mixed with Gallo-Roman ones over generations. The resulting pattern is not one of conquest but of integration. It shows how humanity's strength lies in blending and adaptation. According to experts, the Franks contributed not only genes but also a sense of unity that would later define France. They transformed a crumbling province into a kingdom capable of enduring for centuries. Their descendants ruled much of Europe, spreading their mixed heritage far beyond Gaul's borders. In modern times, population geneticists use this period to study how migration creates new identities. Each genetic wave becomes part of a deeper mosaic. When samples from France are compared with those from the USA and Northern Europe, scientists can still detect the Frankish signature, a reminder of how ancient movements shaped the modern Western world. The Franks remind us that no civilization stands alone. Every culture inherits the strength of those who came before. Their story shows that the fall of one empire can give rise to another through the power of human adaptation. DNA makes that process visible at the smallest scale, turning bones into witnesses of transformation. The Germanic bloodlines that once crossed the Rhine continue to live within millions of people today, binding past and present together through biology. Their resilience, discipline, and sense of order became part of the French character, blending with Celtic creativity and Latin elegance. The result was a nation unlike any other in Europe, a place where multiple legacies fused into one. As scientists continue decoding the genetic archives of this era, new discoveries will likely deepen our understanding of how the Franks shaped Europe's destiny. Here's a question. Please comment in the comment box. How do you think the blending of Germanic and Roman traditions helped create the lasting identity of France? When Roman legions marched into Gaul in the 1st century BCE, they carried more than weapons. They carried genes, culture, and a vision of order that would reshape Europe. Julius Caesar's conquest opened a new era of transformation. Archaeologists have uncovered Roman forts, towns, and villas across France, each a node of imperial expansion. But the deepest changes were biological. Roman soldiers, settlers, and merchants came from Italy, Spain, Greece, and North Africa. They brought their bloodlines and mingled with the local Celtic population. According to experts, this intermixing produced a vast new genetic landscape that still defines southern and central France. Modern DNA studies confirm that Mediterranean markers increased sharply after Roman occupation. In Provence, Languedoc, and along the Rhone Valley, genetic profiles resemble those of ancient Italy more than pre-Roman Gaul. The Roman Empire was not just a political power, but a migration engine. Veterans were granted land in conquered regions, and many married local women. These unions produced generations of citizens who embodied both Gaulish and Roman ancestry. Latin became the language of government and trade, and over time, even the DNA of the land spoke with a Mediterranean accent. Genetic traces of Southern European ancestry in modern France align perfectly with the old Roman road network. Wherever stone roads connected cities, genetic exchange followed. This scientific correlation between infrastructure and DNA flow fascinates historians. It shows how civilization literally moved through the veins of empire. Reports from European research projects note that mitochondrial DNA, passed through maternal lines, bears strong continuity between Roman and modern French samples. This means that local women remained rooted in their homeland even as new men arrived. The blending was gradual and enduring. Genetic signatures from this era also reveal links to North Africa and the Eastern Mediterranean, proving that Roman Gaul was more cosmopolitan than once believed. Archaeological discoveries at Arles, Lyon, and Nîmes show burial sites containing individuals of mixed ancestry, from Iberian traders to Syrian merchants. Each carried stories of empire inscribed in their genes. These communities became the seedbed of modern French diversity. Romanization was cultural as well as biological. Schools, baths, and amphitheaters introduced new lifestyles, but DNA shows how deeply the transformation went. It was not imposed from above, but integrated through family life and daily contact. Over centuries, local elites adopted Roman customs while rural families blended traditions. By the time the empire began to fade, the genetic fusion was complete. The people of Gaul had become Romans in both culture and ancestry. Yet this integration also set the stage for future complexity. When Germanic tribes like the Franks later arrived, they encountered not pure Celts but Romanized populations already mixed and resilient. This layered ancestry explains the genetic richness of modern France. The Roman contribution added southern warmth to northern strength, balancing Europe's genetic palette. Scientists analyzing DNA from ancient bones near Marseille found markers typical of central Italy, confirming that migration from the heart of the empire reached deep into Gaul. Other studies compared these sequences to modern French genomes and found remarkable continuity over 2,000 years. The Roman footprint never vanished. It remains strongest in the south, where surnames, dialects, and even cuisines still carry echoes of ancient Rome. Historians say that this genetic legacy helped shape the French tendency towards synthesis and adaptation. The empire taught people how to absorb new ideas and integrate outsiders. That lesson, written in DNA, endured long after the legions withdrew. Modern population genetics demonstrates how stable this blend became. Even after centuries of invasions, Roman markers persist in every region. They are part of the invisible framework of French identity. Scientists from Italy, France, and the USA collaborated on large genome projects that revealed these enduring connections. The results showed that while politics may fragment nations, genes preserve shared roots across borders. The Roman era reminds us that migration and cultural exchange are not threats but engines of progress. Through them, new civilizations are born. The French genome stands as proof of that process. Each strand carries the memory of a Mediterranean sun shining on Gallic soil. Every family line that survived war and empire became a bridge between worlds. That is why DNA research matters. It tells us that history lives not just in ruins but within us. France's Roman chapter was one of roads, marriages, and transformations that shaped the continent's heart. As we decode these genetic signatures today, we rediscover a truth ancient as the empire itself, unity built through diversity. Here's a question. Please comment in the comment box. Do you believe the Roman Empire's legacy still influences the character and diversity of modern France? Long before France and Spain were divided by borders, their ancestors shared the same valleys, coastlines, and genetic roots. The Pyrenees were not barriers but bridges linking ancient peoples for thousands of years. Archaeological digs on both sides of these mountains have uncovered evidence of early farmers who migrated from the Mediterranean, bringing new crops, languages, and DNA. According to experts, southern France and northern Spain were part of one cultural and biological sphere during prehistory. Genetic studies confirm that many people in southwestern France carry Iberian ancestry reaching back to the Neolithic age. Around 7,000 years ago, early settlers from the Iberian Peninsula moved north along the Garonne River, mixing with local hunter-gatherers. Their genes introduced Mediterranean traits that still appear in southern French DNA today. Researchers call this the Atlantic Corridor, a pathway through which both goods and families moved freely. The people who built megalithic tombs, traded obsidian, and fished the Atlantic coast left a shared legacy written in the genome. Later migrations during the Bronze and Iron Ages strengthened these links. The Iberians and Celts traded metals and pottery, and genetic markers from this exchange remain visible in modern populations. DNA extracted from ancient bones in the Basque region and Gascony shows a nearly continuous lineage that predates the Roman Empire. Scientists say this makes it one of the oldest unbroken genetic zones in Europe. Even the Basque population, famous for its unique language, shares ancient genetic components with nearby French regions, proving that identity and biology can intertwine in complex ways. When Roman armies expanded into both Spain and Gaul, they further unified these lands under one empire. Trade routes across the Pyrenees carried soldiers, merchants, and migrants. Each left traces of their ancestry behind. Genetic data from ancient burials in Toulouse, Narbonne, and Barcelona reveal almost identical patterns of Mediterranean and Celtic DNA. This proves that borders in antiquity were fluid and that culture flowed as easily as bloodlines. The Iberian connection also appears in mitochondrial DNA, which follows maternal descent. Studies show strong links between French and Spanish women's lineages, indicating that families intermarried frequently along the southern frontier. These maternal networks helped preserve stability even when politics shifted. They remind us that real human connections often endure beyond the rise and fall of states. Modern technology such as whole genome sequencing now allows scientists to reconstruct this shared past in unprecedented detail. Samples taken from ancient skeletons found in the foothills of the Pyrenees show distinct Iberian ancestry, particularly in the genes controlling pigmentation and metabolism. This suggests adaptation to similar environments and diets across the region. According to reports from population genetic institutes, roughly 15% of modern southern French DNA carries direct Iberian signatures. That percentage is higher near the coastal zones, where trade and seafaring were common. Archaeologists have even found amphorae from Spain and Gaulish sites, indicating constant exchange of goods and likely people. The Iberian influence also continued during later centuries. When Visigoths ruled southern Gaul and Spain, they reinforced connections across the mountains. Their Germanic ancestry merged with the already mixed populations, creating another layer of diversity. Modern studies comparing French, Spanish, and Portuguese genomes reveal gradual gradients rather than sharp divisions. The deeper scientists look, the more they find continuity instead of separation. These discoveries reshape how we think about Europe's formation. Rather than isolated nations, the continent was a network of migrating families sharing resources and DNA. Southern France stands as a genetic crossroads of the Atlantic and Mediterranean worlds. Its people carry signatures from prehistoric farmers, Celtic warriors, Roman settlers, and Iberian traders. This blend helped shape the character of the region known for openness and creativity. The genetic harmony between both sides of the Pyrenees also teaches a modern lesson, that cooperation and exchange have always been part of human survival. When compared with genetic data from the USA and other continents, the Iberian-French connection stands out as one of Europe's most continuous ancestral bonds. It shows how ancient relationships shape today's populations far beyond visible borders. Every modern genome carries invisible threads stretching across time and terrain. Science has finally made those threads visible. The Pyrenees, once thought of as a dividing line, now appear as a symbol of unity. DNA reveals that ancient farmers and traders who crossed these mountains created one of the longest-lasting kinships in human history. Their descendants live on both sides, unaware that their shared blood once flowed freely through a land without frontiers. It is a story written not in history books, but in the double helix of life. Here's a question. Please comment in the comment box. Do you think ancient trade and migration between France and Spain still influence the shared culture scene in southern Europe today? 1,000 years ago, ships from the cold north appeared along the French coast. They carried warriors, traders, and settlers from Scandinavia who would forever change the land they reached. These Norsemen, later called Normans, began as raiders but soon became rulers. In the 9th century, Viking fleets sailed up the Seine and Loire rivers, attacking towns but also founding settlements. The Frankish kings, unable to stop them, offered land in exchange for peace. That land became Normandy, the domain of the Northmen. Archaeological discoveries show how rapidly the Vikings adapted. They built farms, markets, and fortresses and intermarried with local Frankish and Gallo-Roman families. The blending of their northern genes with native French DNA left a lasting signature still found in people living in Normandy and parts of northern France today. Geneticists studying ancient burials near Rouen and Bayeux identified distinct Scandinavian markers, especially in Y chromosome patterns passed through male lines. These traits link modern Normans directly to populations from Denmark and southern Norway. According to experts, About 10% of DNA in Normandy can be traced to Viking ancestry. This is small in percentage but immense in cultural impact. The Normans became one of medieval Europe's most dynamic peoples, combining northern vigor with Latin sophistication. Their hybrid identity turned them into explorers and empire builders. Just a few generations after settling, they invaded England in 1066 and later reached Sicily and the Holy Land. Their adaptability reflected the very genetic fusion that defined their origins. The Viking contribution also influenced physical traits. Some Normans still display fair hair and blue eyes typical of Northern Europe, though the overall population remains blended. Scientists use genome mapping to compare modern Normans with ancient Scandinavian remains, finding remarkable continuity. These genetic traces confirm historical accounts describing how the Norse integrated rather than replaced locals. Their colonies were not ethnic enclaves but open societies that merged traditions. DNA shows that Viking settlers married local women soon after arriving, ensuring rapid assimilation. By the time Duke William prepared his conquest of England, Normandy had become more French than Norse in language but still carried northern blood. Modern population studies reveal that these Scandinavian signatures extend beyond Normandy into parts of Brittany, Picardy, and the Channel Islands. This spread reflects centuries of trade and migration between coastal communities. The sea connected people more than it separated them. Genetic diversity increased as sailors and merchants intermarried across ports from Scandinavia to the Bay of Biscay. When compared with samples from Denmark and Sweden, French coastal DNA reveals subtle but clear overlaps. Scientists from France, Norway, and the USA collaborated to map these findings, showing how Viking genes became threads in the French tapestry. The results demonstrate that even small migrations can leave enduring marks on populations. The Norman story also illustrates how culture travels alongside DNA. Their architecture, law, and maritime skills spread through France and beyond. Many medieval innovations in shipbuilding and governance came from this cultural blend. The fusion of Viking independence with Frankish discipline helped shape a society both adventurous and organized. Genetic evidence supports this narrative of harmony. The proportion of Scandinavian ancestry remained stable for centuries, neither erased nor dominant. It coexisted within a balanced genome reflecting many origins. Historians suggest that this genetic equilibrium contributed to the region's later creativity and openness. Normandy became a hub of innovation, producing explorers who crossed oceans and nobles who shaped European politics. The same spirit that carried their ancestors across the North Sea now flowed through generations of French adventurers. DNA science has given this legend a biological foundation. The Viking heritage is no longer just a tale of raids, but a story of integration and transformation. Ancient cemeteries tell of families where northern and local names appear side by side. The bones confirm what the chronicles hinted at, a merging of peoples rather than endless war. Every genome from this region carries whispers of that alliance. The Normans proved that identity could evolve without losing strength. Their descendants helped shape the French nation as it entered the high medieval era. They left behind castles, language, and the spark of exploration that later fueled journeys across the Atlantic. In their genes, the cold winds of Scandinavia met the soft air of Gaul, creating a lineage both strong and enduring. Geneticists see this as a perfect example of human adaptation through diversity. When we trace modern French DNA, the northern signal reminds us how far people have traveled to build shared futures. The story of Normandy proves that what begins as invasion can end in unity. It also links France to the greatest story of Europe's interconnected past. The Viking imprint may be small in numbers, but it is vast in influence. It shaped the destiny of nations and helped define what it means to blend courage with culture. Here's a question. Please comment in the comment box. Do you think the Viking spirit of exploration still echoes in the innovative character of northern France today? The Middle Ages were not static as once imagined. They were an age of roads, movement, and the constant exchange of ideas and people. As cathedrals rose and cities grew, France became a crossroads of Europe, and its DNA reflected this restless energy. From the 11th to the 15th centuries, waves of travelers crossed its borders, pilgrims on their way to Santiago de Compostela, merchants from Flanders, Italy, and the Levant, and scholars who followed knowledge from monastery to university. Each brought language, art, and genes. Archaeological evidence from medieval cemeteries near Paris, Marseille, and Toulouse shows a striking variety of ancestral origins. Genetic studies confirm the same pattern. New markers from southern Europe, North Africa, and even Central Asia appeared during this time. The Crusades and expanding trade routes opened France to distant influences. Soldiers and traders returned from the Eastern Mediterranean, often with foreign wives or servants who carried diverse genetic lineages. According to experts, this period enriched the French genome, adding subtle layers that deepened regional variety. In coastal towns, DNA shows Mediterranean ancestry increasing by as much as 5%, evidence of merchants and sailors mixing with locals. Inland cities reveal smaller but noticeable shifts as commerce connected once isolated communities. The church itself encouraged mobility through pilgrimages. Millions traveled on foot each year, meeting strangers and forming families far from home. Genetic traces of these encounters still ripple through modern populations. Historians once described medieval France as provincial, but DNA tells another story. It was global long before globalization had a name. The Great Phase of Champagne drew traders from across Europe, North Africa, and the Near East. Archaeologists unearthed coins from Cairo and ceramic from Spain in these markets, proof of far-reaching connections. The genomes of the people who lived nearby show matching signatures from those same regions. This interweaving of genes mirrored the growing complexity of medieval life. Cities expanded, crafts specialized, and people learned to live among strangers. Scientists now use genome sequencing to reconstruct these invisible journeys. One study of skeletal remains from a 12th century burial in southern France revealed a woman with genetic ancestry from both the Eastern Mediterranean and local Gaulish lines, a living symbol of two worlds joined through migration. Experts suggest that these subtle exchanges built the foundation of Europe's later cosmopolitan culture. DNA diversity correlates strongly with urban growth and innovation. Where people met and mixed, progress followed. The medieval French genome thus became more intricate and resilient, reflecting a society learning to absorb change. Even within Europe, migrations continued. Flemish weavers moved south to Normandy, Lombard bankers traveled north to Lyon, and scholars from England studied in Paris. Each left genetic footprints still detectable today. Modern population maps show gradients of ancestry that trace these medieval paths. They remind us that history's greatest strength lies in movement, not isolation. The Black Death in the 14th century briefly disrupted this flow, reducing population numbers drastically. Yet even that catastrophe reshaped the genome by concentrating surviving lineages. Scientists studying ancient DNA from plague-era burials found signs of genetic adaptations that improved immunity, some of which still exist in modern French populations. The disaster became another force of natural selection that shaped the biology of Europe. After recovery, new migrations resumed with vigor. Merchants and artisans spread through growing towns, accelerating genetic exchange once more. By the end of the Middle Ages, the population of France had become an extraordinary mosaic: Celtic, Latin, Germanic, Scandinavian, Mediterranean, and even Near Eastern in trace. Each layer added depth to the national character. When compared with other regions, France shows one of the highest levels of genetic diversity in Western Europe, a legacy of these medieval movements. Scientists from France, Britain, and the USA collaborated on comparative genome projects that confirmed how trade and travel increased biological mixing. The results aligned perfectly with historical records, turning human mobility into measurable data. This genetic blending helped prepare France for its later role as a center of art, science, and diplomacy. A population that has learned to integrate differences tends to innovate more easily. The DNA record proves that openness has always been one of France's greatest strengths. The medieval centuries, often seen as dark, were in fact luminous with connection. Behind the stone walls and narrow streets flowed a river of humanity linking continents and generations. The genes of pilgrims, soldiers, and merchants became the fabric of a nation still admired for its diversity and creativity. As we decode their story through modern science, we realize that history's true journeys happen not only on roads but within us. Each cell carries evidence of those who walked, sailed, and dreamed across the medieval world. Here's a question. Please comment in the comment box. How do you think the constant movement of people during the Middle Ages helped shape France's diverse culture and identity today? When the French Revolution erupted in the late 18th century, it did more than topple kings. It tore down the barriers that had divided provinces for centuries. People who once lived their entire lives in the same village began to move, driven by war, opportunity, and new ideas of equality. This human movement would reshape the genetic map of France just as powerfully as it reshaped its politics. Before the revolution, regions had strong local identities rooted in ancient lineages: Breton, Provençal, Alsatian, and Basque. Afterward, those lines began to blur. Soldiers conscripted into revolutionary and Napoleonic armies traveled across the nation, marrying partners from distant areas. Their children carried the combined ancestry of multiple provinces. According to experts, this period marked one of the most significant phases of internal genetic mixing in European history. Population studies comparing modern DNA with 18th century records show how quickly regional differences diminished. Genetic markers once concentrated in isolated valleys began appearing nationwide within 2 or 3 generations. The concept of a unified French identity became not only political but biological. The movement of people accelerated during the Industrial Revolution. Cities like Paris, Lyon, and Marseille drew workers from every corner of the country. Each migrant carried unique genetic variations inherited from local ancestors. As they formed new communities, they created a melting pot unseen since the Roman era. By the middle of the 19th century, France had one of the most diverse internal genomes in Europe. Scientists studying mitochondrial DNA patterns described this as a national blending event. It forged a single population from many local streams. Railway construction and urban expansion amplified the process. The new mobility erased the isolation that had preserved distinct regional lineages for centuries. Farmers from the Pyrenees worked alongside miners from Lorraine and fishermen from Brittany. Their families intermarried, dissolving old genetic boundaries. This unprecedented movement also linked France more closely to the wider world. Colonization and global trade brought foreign sailors, merchants, and diplomats to French ports. Some settled permanently, adding subtle traces of North African, Caribbean, and Asian ancestry to coastal regions. These new strands merged seamlessly into the national genome, continuing the long tradition of diversity that defined France since ancient times. Scientists estimate that less than 5% of modern French DNA originates from these overseas exchanges, yet its symbolic importance is immense. It reflects the openness of a nation connected to global currents. The rise of modern medicine, improved transport, and education further promoted intermarriage across regions. Each generation became genetically more mixed than the last. By the early 20th century, the once distinct Celtic, Latin, and Germanic zones had largely blended into one continuous genetic gradient. This unity, confirmed by large-scale DNA mapping projects, reveals a country where diversity became identity itself. The revolution's ideals of liberty and equality found expression in biology. Every person became a mosaic of provinces rather than a product of one. Geneticists often compare this internal blending to similar demographic events in the USA, where migration from many states forged shared ancestry despite different origins. In France, the phenomenon was slower but equally transformative. The soldiers who marched under Napoleon unknowingly carried out a vast genetic unification project. Their descendants became citizens not only by law but by lineage. Regional pride survived in language and food, but genetically the nation became one. Modern research using genome sequencing shows how this process continued through both world wars, when millions were displaced or resettled. Every upheaval mixed bloodlines further, erasing the last remnants of medieval isolation. Yet through all this change, the deep roots of Celtic, Roman, and Frankish ancestry remained visible, proof that while nations evolve, they never forget their origins. Scientists note that today's French genome still contains regional subtleties, like faint accents in a shared language, but the overarching pattern is unity through mixture. This blending enriched the population's health and adaptability by expanding genetic diversity. It also strengthened cultural cohesion, allowing France to emerge from centuries of conflict as a single people with many stories. The DNA of modern citizens stands as a living monument to the revolution's promise that every region contributes equally to the whole. Genetic studies conducted in Paris and Marseille confirmed this harmony between biology and history. When the data are plotted on maps, France appears as a continuous spectrum of ancestry, beautifully balanced between north and south, east and west. No border within can divide what evolution and migration have joined. In the quiet language of molecules, liberty and fraternity are written into the nation's very structure. Here's a question. Please comment in the comment box. Do you think the movement and unity sparked by the revolution still shape how modern France sees itself as one nation of many origins? In the 21st century, the story of France's ancestry has entered a new era. Scientists no longer rely on legend or record. They can now read the past directly from the human genome. Laboratories across Europe are sequencing thousands of samples, decoding how ancient migrations, wars, and unions sculpted the modern French identity. The results reveal one of the most intricate genetic tapestries on Earth. France sits at the heart of Europe, a crossroads where northern, southern, eastern, and western lineages meet. Genome maps show that while neighboring countries often display dominant ancestry from one origin, France remains an even blend. Roughly one-third of its DNA traces to Celtic ancestors of Iron Age Gaul, another third to Mediterranean settlers from the Roman world, and the rest to Germanic, Scandinavian, and later migratory inputs. These proportions vary by region, but remain balanced overall, forming a biological reflection of France's cultural diversity. Geneticists describe this pattern as equilibrium born from millennia of mixing. According to reports from major European institutes, the French genome is among the most stable in Western Europe, diverse yet unified. Researchers compare modern samples with ancient remains to reconstruct how these genes traveled through time. From Iron Age hillforts in Burgundy to Roman cemeteries near Marseille, every discovery adds precision to the picture. Advanced computational models simulate how populations merged, estimating migration waves with near accuracy. The findings confirm what history hinted at. France's DNA evolved not through replacement, but integration. Every newcomer added rather than erased. The genomic evidence also supports the idea that environment and geography shaped adaptation. Northern populations show genetic markers related to cold resistance and vitamin D metabolism, while southern groups display traits suited to warmer, Mediterranean climates. This regional variation, subtle but measurable, shows how nature collaborated with history to sculpt diversity. As scientists refine sequencing technology, they can even trace how genes spread along ancient trade routes. Studies show that genetic similarities align with old Roman roads and medieval pilgrimage paths. Data visualizations turn these into living maps of connection. In Brittany, researchers found continued Celtic signatures but also traces of maritime exchange with Britain and Ireland. In Provence, DNA links to ancient Greek colonies blend seamlessly with Roman and Iberian lines. France's genome is thus not a patchwork but a continuous gradient of influence. Collaboration with international partners has expanded these insights. Projects comparing French genomes with those from the USA and Asia reveal how migration after the Industrial Revolution carried French ancestry worldwide. About 6 million people in the USA have measurable French genetic components, reflecting centuries of emigration from Normandy, Brittany, and Alsace. These global ties help researchers understand how European genes dispersed and adapted across continents. The technology driving these revelations is breathtaking. Whole genome sequencing analyzes billions of DNA letters to reconstruct deep ancestry. Machine learning algorithms identify subtle genetic clusters invisible to older methods. Through this precision, science transforms history into data and data into story. Yet the results also invite reflection. DNA confirms that identity is fluid, shaped by countless unions across borders and generations. No nation is isolated, no heritage pure. The French genome proves that diversity is not modern, it is ancient. Experts emphasize that genetic variation enhances health and resilience. By mixing lineages, populations gain protection against disease and environmental change. This biological truth mirrors the social strength of a multicultural nation. Each regional gene becomes a thread in the collective fabric, vital to the whole. Modern researchers also explore how epigenetics, the way environment influences gene activity, records recent history. The industrial age, wars, and even famine have left chemical marks on DNA, passing faint echoes of experience to descendants. Thus, the genome is not only a record of who people were but also of what they endured. French scientists study these patterns to understand how stress, nutrition, and adaptation shape future generations. The genomic age makes ancestry both science and philosophy. It shows that unity and variation coexist naturally, and that the boundaries drawn by politics are invisible to biology. Every person alive today carries stories older than writing itself, whispered through chromosomes. France, long a symbol of culture and revolution, now stands as a symbol of genetic harmony. Its people embody the blending of Europe's ancient tribes, empires, and explorers. When the data are visualized on maps, the country glows like a prism, each region reflecting a different hue, yet together forming light. The genome becomes a living monument, more enduring than stone. Scientists continue to uncover new details, but one message is already clear. The French nation, like its DNA, is strongest in its diversity. It proves that human history is a story of connection, not separation. Here's a question. Please comment in the comment box. How do you think modern DNA research might change the way nations understand their shared human origins? Modern France stands as a living mosaic shaped by thousands of years of migration, conflict, and cooperation. Each citizen carries within them fragments of history that reach back to the dawn of Europe. The latest genetic research reveals that beneath the languages, customs, and regional pride lies a biological unity created by diversity itself. Scientists describe France as one of the most genetically balanced nations on Earth. The data show a population descended from Celts, Romans, Franks, and Vikings, blended with traces of Iberian, Mediterranean, and even North African ancestry. These aren't separate chapters but intertwined threads forming a single story of continuity. Geneticists use terms like admixture and gradient to describe this harmony, a seamless flow of ancestry across geography and time. The map of French DNA looks like a watercolor painting, with no sharp boundaries, only subtle transitions from one influence to another. In Brittany, Celtic markers still whisper of the ancient Gauls. In the northeast, Germanic patterns recall the Frankish kingdoms. The south glows with Mediterranean genes brought by Roman settlers and seafarers from Iberia. Normandy keeps its faint Scandinavian spark, proof of Viking ambition. And in every major city, centuries of mobility have woven these elements together into one national fabric. According to experts, the French genome is not static but evolving as new waves of migration continue to enrich it. Refugees, students, and workers arriving from Africa, Asia, and the Americas add modern layers to this ancient story. Their children grow up as part of the same genetic continuum that began with prehistoric hunters. DNA proves that France has always been open, adaptive, and dynamic. This continuity through change defines its strength. Studies comparing genomes from France, Italy, Germany, and the USA show how shared ancestry links people across continents. Around 6 million Americans carry partial French heritage, illustrating how migration spreads the nation's legacy far beyond Europe. Science transforms these statistics into a human truth, that all populations are branches of one global family tree. The French example reminds the world that unity does not require sameness. Diversity builds resilience. It creates societies capable of innovation and empathy. Geneticists explain that mixed populations tend to adapt faster to environmental challenges, an advantage written directly into the code of life. In this sense, France's history of blending is also a blueprint for the future. Archaeological discoveries continue to connect DNA with material culture. Tools from Neolithic farmers, weapons of Gaulish warriors, Roman amphorae, and Viking jewelry all find echoes in genetic sequences recovered from ancient remains. Each artifact, each chromosome, tells a complementary story of how humanity evolves through encounter. Museums and universities collaborate with genome laboratories, turning history into a dialogue between bones and data. The results are poetic as well as scientific. They reveal that every French person carries within them the pulse of empires long gone and the endurance of countless ancestors who survived wars, plagues, and revolutions. Their legacy lives not in monuments but in the quiet code that sustains life. Population genetics has made identity both humbling and empowering. It shows that national pride need not deny complexity. To be French is to embody centuries of exchange, Celtic courage, Roman discipline, Frankish resolve, and Norman exploration blended with the creativity of later generations. Modern science restores what history once simplified. It invites reflection on how far humanity has come since those first migrations across ice and sea. In classrooms and documentaries, these discoveries inspire new ways of teaching heritage. Instead of focusing on borders, they emphasize bridges, how every migration enriches rather than dilutes. The story of French DNA is not just national, it is universal. It echoes the same patterns seen in Asia, Africa, and the Americas. Everywhere, the genome records the same truth. We are travelers who share one long road. France's unique balance of ancient lineages demonstrates that peace and prosperity arise from inclusion, not exclusion. Experts believe that studying this harmony may help societies elsewhere understand their own mixtures better. The more we learn, the clearer it becomes that purity is a myth and that connection is destiny. As technology advances, genetic archaeology will reveal even older links buried beneath the soil. Future studies may trace prehistoric migrations that unite Europe and Africa in ways still unseen. Yet the message will remain the same. The strength of civilization lies in its willingness to evolve together. The French genome stands as a quiet anthem to that truth, a song written not in words but in code. Each cell carries the music of time, composed by countless generations who lived, loved, and dreamed on the same soil. Their story continues every time new life begins. Science simply gives it a voice. The DNA of France tells us that identity is not built by walls but by bridges that endure across millennia. Here's a question. Please comment in the comment box. Do you believe that understanding our shared DNA can help humanity move beyond borders and build a more united future?
From Celt warriors to Roman builders and Frankish kings, every chapter of French history lives inside modern DNA. Science now confirms that ancestry is not a single origin story, but a living network of shared genes. These findings connect France people to their ancient roots and to humanity's wider journey across continents. Remember, DNA doesn't divide us, it unites us. If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe, like, and share your thoughts in the comments below. What ancient people do you think left the deepest mark on French identity? Let's explore the next mystery of our shared past together.